Hi, I'm Leslie Julien, co-writer of Savage Wizard, and you're watching Two Geeks Talking.
Hey, this is Brian Flint. I'm the illustrator for Savage Wizard, and you're watching Two Geeks Talking.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We're joined today by two very talented individuals, part of a trio of creative, talented people from the comic Savage Wizard. They have a Kickstarter ongoing. Beautiful artwork, amazing writing, but I'll let them describe more about themselves and this particular comic. We are joined today, of course, by Leslie Julien and Brian Flint. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Doing good, doing good. So for those that don't know anything about this particular comic, tell us what it's all about.
So the quick and dirty version we like to give is basically what if Conan the Barbarian was forced to become a wizard? It's a crazy story about revenge and empathy and repeatedly hacking and slashing your enemies along the way.
Sounds like a perfect Conan-esque type comic. I love it already. You are, of course, one of three people here today. Obviously, we have Brian Flint, a talented artist in his own right. Who else is working with you on this particular project?
Doug Wood is a co-writer. He wasn't able to make it today. And also Toben Racicot is the letterer on this project.
Brian, when you actually got a hold of this particular script, what was the first thing that popped into your mind?
Mostly how I haven't done a book like this before, and I was pretty excited to try, some sword and sorcery kind of stuff. It's way out of my wheelhouse.
What is your wheelhouse?
I'm more of a horror, zombie monster kind of comic book artist. So this is a little different in, the whole sword and orcs and that good stuff.
But it's still a fun genre to draw, though, I hope, at least, because, it looks beautiful. Like, I saw the inking and the black and white coloring, and it was beautiful. The first page alone was just like, wow, that wow factor was already there. And I love what you all three of you, all four of you, I should say, have done with this particular comic.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's fun to draw. It's just when you got big, like, shirtless, muscular dudes, it's a lot of anatomy to get right. So it's fun. It just takes a long time.
And it's not like you don't have wonderful references as well to go by. Conan's obviously the epitome of the true barbarian, but you got Jason Momoa and a few others as well in the industry currently too, right?
Actually, the reference material they gave us was mostly wrestlers. So It was actually a lot of like Samoan dudes and like a lot of like African like warriors and stuff like that were really instrumental to designing the characters. We're kind of leaning in less, more like the Jason Momoa thing you brought up, and less of the like Arnold Schwarzenegger or like the, blonde haired typical barbarian dude.
When you have an iconic, vision of obviously Conan is like the epitome of a barbarian when it comes to action and all of that stuff. But talking about the story itself of course, Savage Wizard, why was the story important to tell for you, Leslie, and of course, Doug, when you both co-wrote it?
Pretty much the story actually came out of thin air at the time when I conceived it. It was during Pitchvember, and you're basically supposed to come up with like a log line for a story every day. And so throughout the month of November, back in like 2019, I came up with a bunch of random ideas, and this was one of them. And Doug approached me to co-write something together, and we had never co-written anything, but we decided we were going to give it a shot. And so we were going back and forth with ideas, and I kind of threw this one at him. It's like, hey, what if a barbarian had to, I'm a magic user basically, and he jumped right on it. He loved it. And so I think it was just, we had so much fun with it. We just really wanted to get out into the world. Like we just love what we were doing with it. And then especially once Brian came on board, we were like, we want people to see this. Like, you have to see this because it's just so fun. And the art just takes it to another level,
The world that you've created here, obviously the characters are important, but if you don't have a good world base to go from, then your story means nothing, truly. So obviously there's conflict. Obviously there's tribes and there's different factions and all that other stuff as well too. What did you draw from to create this particular, what did you both draw from to create this particular world then?
I feel like a little bit of that sword and sorcery trope in a larger sense, or the genre in a larger sense. But really, we were, pulling from things that seem interesting to us in terms of Native cultures throughout history, and just things that seem like visually appealing. We kind of crafted things based on the world itself we're creating. So there are some tribes that come up that I think complement the world that you will see later on, and pretty much we wanted to tell a story that's a little bit different than I feel like you normally see in sword and sorcery stories. One, because it does center Black and brown protagonists, and two, also because this is a comedy. It's an action-packed comedy, but we're really telling this through a really comedic lens. We're having a lot of fun with it. So we weren't trying to be too self-serious with this. We really just wanted to tell a fun, crazy comedy story. Like I said, we hadn't seen personally too much. Now it seems like it's happening a lot more. There are a couple other stories that are similar now, but I think this is something at the time when we started, was like, hey, we didn't really see anything like this,
You mentioned that, you and Doug had not worked together before. What strengths does Doug bring to the co-writing process, and what do you bring to the co-writing process?
I would say, if you've seen Doug's work in his portfolio, Doug gets things done. Like, Doug was definitely the one that was, I think, pushing this along a lot more. Doug kind of writes from the hip, writes from the gut a lot more. And he would say that I'm a lot more procedural, a lot more structured, which is funny because I don't always see myself in that manner. But Doug definitely says that I kind of helped bring out a little bit more the structure in him. So that's definitely the difference, the peanut butter and jelly of our collaboration.
And what about the weaknesses of each of you? Obviously, everyone from a creative standpoint has their own weaknesses, but what is your weakness and what was his that you both complemented each other on to make each other better?
For me, I can say it can either be like indecision, or like perfectionism can be a really bad one, just because like that's one where you just kind of get stuck in your head, and you're not necessarily producing the work because you're too busy, creating something and erasing it, creating it, start from scratch. So Doug really helped to pull me out of that cycle like I can get stuck into sometimes, in order to kind of propel the production of this book and make sure that we kept going forward and didn't get sidetracked on too many tangents, because that can definitely be an issue of mine, a weakness of mine. I can kind of get too sucked into like, oh, like, does this work? And then next thing you know, I'm falling on a rabbit hole in Wikipedia thing of like, worrying about like, the I don't know, like the loincloth accuracy or something stupid. So yeah, I think that's definitely a weakness of mine. For Doug, good question. What would I say Doug's weakness? Doug's weakness, I say, might be kind of tied to that instinctual gut feeling. Sometimes he isn't always able to vocalize reasons why he wants to do something in a script. And there were one or two times where I guess he couldn't necessarily explain why he wanted to do something. And for most part, I think that was something that he did get around, but there were one or two times where there like maybe some slight miscommunication, just because that co-writing process is a lot different, when you're trying to justify when you want to keep something in a script to someone else versus to yourself.
To you, Brian, obviously from an art perspective here, you said your strengths are horror and that type of genre, but I mean, your take on the fantasy world that you've created is truly amazing. Like I can't express enough how much I love that the black and white style that you created here. And obviously you said anatomy was a huge portion of this particular aspect, but what other weaknesses as an artist have you overcome with this particular project?
So as a guy with ADHD, if I'm not careful, I will like sink into hyperfocus, where I'm just kind of fixated on working on, let's say, getting that forearm to look just right. And 2.5 hours will have gone by and I will have filled in, maybe 10% of a panel. And that, that's not good as a comic book artist. So that's definitely something that I struggle with every single time I'm working on pages. Is keeping momentum going and getting things done on time.
Does that hyper focus also, or do you consider that a strength as well too, or is it more of a detriment to your style?
It can be good in certain times if I catch it soon enough. I'm usually having a lot of fun when I'm stuck in those. Like I'm just this is cool. Okay, let me see if I can make it better. This is cool. Let me see if I can make it better. But if I don't finish it, then it doesn't matter how good that one little detail that no one's really going to pay that much attention to. It doesn't matter if I get it perfect if the whole page isn't done yet, and I'm going to stay up and probably not slack, but have to cut corners to make up the time. So not doing that is, it's hard, but it's something that in this book, I feel like I've really kind of put my foot down on it and made sure not to do that as much.
For future projects, what would you take away from this comic that will make you a better artist?
Well, I mean, my anatomy for sure has gotten a lot better. My ability to draw muscles and stuff has gotten a lot better, even without reference now. One trick that I use, I stole one of my kids' egg timers that they had for, when school was on lockdown and I was teaching them. I stole one of those and I'll be like, look, how important is this panel? It's 20% of this page. So I'm going to do an hour and a half. And if I'm not done before that, then, it's just good to have like a visual representation of how much time I've spent on a specific panel. And it's actually helped a ton in keeping things moving. And usually I'll look back at the things that I was hung up on in that moment and be like, no, that's pretty good. It's all right. It doesn't need as much work as I initially thought.
So dealing with ADHD and as an artist, though, is there any tips for beginning artists that may have a similar issue with themselves to try to be creative?
Find ways to make yourself accountable for your time. We have a tendency to procrastinate, put things off, and like kind of feel this dread in your mind before you even start something, even if it's something you enjoy. If you know it's going to be a challenge, sometimes knowing that it can be a challenge can play mind games with you. Also, Adderall is, pretty useful.
From a publishing standpoint, who is the publisher for this particular comic?
So we're self-publishing or trying to crowdfund through Kickstarter.
And that's ongoing right now, right?
Yes, we're at nearly 50% right now.
And when does it end, I should say?
October 15th, I believe like 10:04 in the morning, something like that. But yeah.
Looking at the fact that it's now 50% funded, though, what has been the reaction from those that are supporting it and those that you're approaching to support it?
I mean, there's been a great reaction. I mean, typically, especially when people see Brian's pages, there's just been jaw dropping. Typically, people are like, "Oh my gosh, like this looks amazing. This looks pro level. Like, I definitely want to support this because it looks great." And the people that know me are excited to finally get a chance to. This is like my full length debut, and like I said, people that don't know us or the creative team are instantly in love with Brian's art. So there's been definitely a hugely positive support that we've seen so far.
I love seeing new creative people not only gather together to create amazing projects like what you're currently doing with Savage Wizard, but also the fact that it sounds like you might want to work with these people in the future for other projects too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you have any other projects possibly in the future, or are you just focused more on this to get?
We're definitely focused on this. We do have like a mini series planned for this, so a 4-issue mini series, but we're focused right now on this one case. Right now, we're just focused on this.
And obviously, Kickstarter is a second job when it comes to not only promotion, but also for the perks and for everything else like that to try to get funded. You're obviously set in a deadline to get done. What have you done, or what have you both done, I should say, to help promote this particular campaign?
I mean, have definitely been reaching out to folks like yourself, all the comics podcasters and YouTubers that I can. I've reached out to a few comics publication sites like the Comic Book Yeti and comiccon.com and places like that. And I mean, in general, dusting off my Facebook and promoting there on creative places there, places like Reddit. And so I've just been going all over in terms of especially digitally, getting the word out as much as possible. Instagram, I think I'm going to try to even maybe print out a flyer too. I just moved to San Antonio. I haven't visited my LCS yet, but maybe see if maybe they'd be amenable to backing us, or at least I'll get to check out my LCS, even if they're not.
And how about yourself, Brian, in terms of promotion there? Obviously, as an artist, you get a larger reach, I think, than comic book writers. No offense, Leslie, but how have you been promoting the campaign?
It's really been mostly Leslie and Doug. When it comes to self-promotion and social media and all that stuff, I'm pretty terrible at it. My Instagram, I've used it a bunch recently, but it was collecting dust before I started working on this book. I don't have a Twitter, and I'm not very good at talking to people. So yeah, they're mostly the face. I just kind of hide in the back and draw pictures.
Well, I guess you might have to dust off Twitter as well too, and just just for this project, and away you go.
I'm too old, man. I don't know how that works. I don't know. How do you?
So am I.
That's why Brian's so productive, is because he doesn't use Twitter. So
What other challenges have you had to face, not only to get this book created, but also as creative people yourselves?
Honestly, like, just because you're running a Kickstarter doesn't mean life doesn't stop. So in terms of, like I said, I just moved and then had this Kickstarter start. I moved across the country. I drove a U-Haul and like, boom, here's a Kickstarter starting. And just so figure out the new schedule. And Doug's had some personal issues pop up. So, just having to deal with, just regular life and taking kids to school and, making sure they get fed and all that stuff is, it's just the stuff that we're all dealing with, because we're all three of us are dads. And so, yeah, just life in general is, what we're all wrestling with on top of Kickstarter promotion.
Well, when they reached out to me, we were pretty deep into lockdown and all that fun stuff. And my kids were at home with me. I have four girls. Mm. 3 of them are in school, and they were all doing the at-home school thing and that dominated a ton of time. So I was drawing at night. I was drawing in my car, waiting, to pick them up from this place or that place. And it was a lot of like on the go. Honestly, if I hadn't switched to using an iPad to draw, I probably wouldn't have been able to finish the pages at all, because time alone to work was very hard to come by when I had all my kids home.
So you're a traditional artist still, or are you just now transferred to technology?
I've been doing digital for a long time. I started on one of those, little Wacom tablets, the tiny ones that were like $99. Those, I pretty much learned how to make comics on one of those. I bought one of those big Cintiq ones a couple years back, and I loved it, but finding time to sit in front of this big screen that I love to draw on without a kid coming down and needing something, or, me being isolated for that long was really difficult. So switching to like the little iPad Pro thing, that really helped a ton.
Literary perspective, are you both avid readers?
I'm a fairly regular reader. My wife always manages to get more reading in than me, but I try to. It's kind of hard, like when you're grappling with creating and actually trying to also consume books and media, that can kind of be tough. But in general, I try to read something fairly regularly. My comic book list is growing. I'm behind a lot of stuff, and I usually read audiobooks just because for some reason it's a lot harder for me to actually sit down and read a physical book these days. But I try to keep up with stuff in general.
Comic books have been kind of hard to sit down and read, but thanks to the digital comics, I've actually been able to read a couple while like in bed or something like that. But I just read the Kingkiller Chronicles. I just finished the second book. So I don't know if you've read those books, but there's supposed to be a third one, and that hasn't come out, and I don't think it's going to come out in a long time. It's a whole Game of Thrones thing.
What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Ooh, good question. Um, I guess without thinking too hard about it, I remember it was probably like first or second grade. We had like a little school magazine or something like that, or school newsletter, and I think they asked us to do like short stories, and I guess there was like a short story contest, and I submitted something, and I think it actually was, it got like a pretty decent standing, like maybe like second or third place, like out of the whole school, and I just remember feeling like, wow, like people like my stuff other than me. Like that's pretty cool.
That's a tough one. I've never been asked that question before.
That's a good one.
Yeah, language has power. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that, to be honest. More recently, actually, I feel like it's become super clear that language and words and how you phrase things change, people's reactions to stuff. Same facts, different, way of putting it definitely changes how people receive information. And visual language has definitely been something that I've been not struggling, but working very hard to get a good handle on. I've been trying my best to learn and use, visual language to tell the story a lot more than just kind of relying on the text in the bubble and stuff like that, to try to get an underlying message going as well. That was actually a lot trickier than I thought it would be, not just changing a facial expression, but where someone stands in relation to another character, all that stuff, storytelling stuff that they want you to know as a comic book artist.
Mainly it's perspective as well as how light and shadow play into character facial features as well too, or is it just...
I mean, perspective is definitely a big part of it. Lighting for sure plays a big role, but body language is a big thing that if you're brand new to making comics or drawing people, it's hard to get across correctly. Shoulders a little further forward, little back, it all kind of changes how someone comes across. And getting that right in a book is it's tricky, but it's very important. And you kind of notice it with, when you see like the really, really good artists who pull it off without you even thinking about it. Their style might not be the most detailed or might not be the most like anatomically accurate, but they really nail the essence of the person or the feeling they're trying to get out. They can emote very well, visually.
Did you guys hide anything either from a writing perspective or an art perspective, like Easter eggs in your first book?
I know I put a couple things in that I wasn't sure. I mean, Leslie and them, they didn't put that in the script, but I added them. Certain things like certain characters will wear jewelry or something like that to kind of like say who they are as a person. Also, I kind of snuck a couple runes in there that have certain meaning that I hope is correct because I Googled it and I don't really know the language. So, I think one of the characters has a rune that says like myself or something like that because he's kind of a selfish character, so the rune he has that only he wears, I think, is something like that. And then the other one, the rune that's for the tribe itself, is I think the word stone, and his is the word like me or mine or something like that.
From a writing perspective, then, what was your favorite scene to write, and what was the hardest scene to write?
Ooh, great question. My favorite scene to write comes a little bit after the preview pages that we show on the Kickstarter. There is a character who is basically a mentor or ally with our main character, Renar. Her name's Okora, and she is a wizard. She is the wizard alongside the savage. We're doing a simple wordplay there. But basically, I just really love her introduction, and I hope people will enjoy it as much as I did writing it, but I just really love her introduction. I think it kind of gives you a really quick insight into her character. The hardest scene to write, I would say, my memory might be a little fuzzy. I feel like it's still in this first issue, or it might be. Actually, it might be a second issue. Okay, the hardest scene to write, I would say, was actually near the end. How we were trying to figure out how to conclude the book, just because you don't want it to end flat. We wanted to still after like, there's this kind of big denouement, and after the climax, like how do we transition toward wanting people to read more. So I hope we did it justice, but that was a little bit tricky in terms of the tone and the pacing. I think the pacing was the toughest part there.
Then, Brian, from an art perspective, what was your favorite scene to draw, and what was the hardest scene for you to draw?
I think the first couple pages were the hardest. There's a ton of orcs in that one page. And so they're fun to draw, but there's a lot of them. And I didn't want to like relegate the background characters to only being, very, very plain or no detail having drawings. So that took a lot of effort, but I think it was worth it.
At what point are we good enough?
Never.
Never? I just heard stereo for a second.
Yeah, no, that's my answer.
Why is that?
I don't know, but I definitely wouldn't be spending hours and hours and hours drawing and getting good at being an artist if like I was secure in myself as a human being and that I was good enough. So if there wasn't a whole bunch of insecurity behind it, I don't think I'd turn out to be any good as an artist. I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Brian, I would say never. I mean, I'm always learning and evolving, as a person and as a writer, kind of picking up things from outside influences and, not being too stuck in my ways in terms of my process or, just the things I'm able to ingest to adapt and hopefully grow. So, yeah, never is my answer also.
When did your life change for the better?
Oh, I would say when I met my girlfriend, now my wife, for sure, changed tremendously. I always say that she is near my origin story for becoming a comic writer. We were kind of like in a short story group, just the two of us mainly, and I was just writing short stories and but reading a ton of comics at the time. And I had a story that I kind of wanted to make in comic, but I didn't know how. And she's like, why don't you just figure it out? And I was like, oh, I guess that is something you can kind of figure out. And I think it's just been awesome to get back into that creative side of things. And I mean, yeah, like meeting her has totally transformed my life, creatively and obviously, personally, being married and having a kid now and making comics. It's like, yeah, my life is so much better since being here.
Well, for me, I think it's when my first daughter was born. It kind of was a shift mentally for me to change from living, for me or, just to have fun or do whatever, to shift into trying to be a better person. It was actually probably the first time I ever thought, am I good enough? And I definitely thought no. So like that journey starts when another little person kind of needed me to not be the person I was before and to try to be a better person now.
What is one mistake that you will never do again?
Drinking. I won't start drinking ever again. That eats up a lot of time, especially at my age, because the whole next day is shot.
I won't think about it too hard, so I'll just say living in Omaha. Glad to be gone.
Is there anything that I haven't touched upon that you would like those that are watching or listening to this to know about this? We'll talk about social media as well afterwards, but is there anything I've missed?
I think you've really hit things well. I just will reiterate. It seems like it is sometimes lost in folks, but this story is action. I mean, it's brutal, it's gruesome, but it's amazing. But it's also a comedy, and we're hoping to entertain people and have people laugh at just the crazy situations we put these characters in. But it's an action comedy, so if you're into both those things smushed together, we hope you will enjoy.
Oh man, You've asked a lot of really deep questions. So
Oh, we're not done yet. Oh no, I have 4 last questions that go deeper than this.
Here we go.
So I'd say lay down and get your shrink bill ready, but it is what it is. So everyone has one person that inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
I had an art teacher that, even though I didn't learn much art from her, I asked her, like, oh, what do I do? I got out of art school, and I was like, oh, what do I do? I've got, all this stuff I want to draw. She's like, well, you like telling stories, so maybe you should do comic books. Like, you do that pretty well. And that's when I actually started to think about myself as a comic book artist instead of just drawing in sketchbooks and doing nothing with it. So she was pretty instrumental in that.
Just at the time, Brian K. Vaughan was really instrumental in terms of awakening that creative spirit I had inside me again. Reading Runaways and Why the Last Man just wanted me to pick up a pen or open up my laptop and just tell stories again. So Brian K. Vaughan is my answer.
From a professional standpoint, you are creating a comic book. It has a Kickstarter. It's almost funded. And you've also both created amazing works in the past for your careers. Do you consider yourselves personally successful?
I would say yeah, to an extent. I'm hopefully going to reach different levels like success, but yeah, definitely I've kind of been slowly escalating in terms of levels of success, and hopefully that continues. But yeah, I would say I've had reached some moderate level of success, whatever you define that as.
I would say I've had successes, but I wouldn't consider myself successful. I still have a lot of things I want to do. There's a lot left.
The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Denial, mostly. I just push past them and act like, learn what you can in the moment, and then try not to sit around, because that stuff eats me alive if I fixate on it too long.
I think I definitely try to learn what I can from the failure, especially get as much specific knowledge. I typically like to just jump into something new. If I feel like, okay, I put that aside and maybe revisit it, but I just like to jump into something new and kind of put that behind me if I'm feeling the feeling of failure.
The younger generation is looking at your work, and you both have the younger generation that are in your lives currently, and they're becoming inspired to be creative in their own way, whether it's as a writer, as an artist, or whatever they'd like to be creatively. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
I would say, just be true to yourself, tell the stories you want to tell, not because you think that they are going to, do anything commercially. Just, tell the stories that excite you. And if you do that, then, if you're having fun with it, then you will definitely reach people behind you,
I think the most important thing, but most young people won't listen, and I definitely wouldn't have listened when I was a young artist. Don't be afraid to learn all the technical, boring stuff, the rules, that you want to break. It's good to learn them first, because if you do like I did, you spend years going, I don't want to learn that stuff. I want to be unique. And then when you accidentally learn some of the rules and you're like, oh, whoa, this stuff works. Like, I can be creative. I can be this and that. This is just like someone did all this hard work already and learned how to make it look the way I want it to look. I just had to be open-minded and actually sit and do the hard work myself first.
Well, I do hate to say it, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. I do want to thank you both for coming on the show. I do greatly appreciate it. But before I let you go, where can we find, of course, Savage Wizard, and where can we find you both on social media? You can find Savage Wizard at savagewizard.com. We're currently around 50%. Hopefully you'll take us further. And you can find me on Twitter at LesWrite. That's LESWRITE.
And I'm pretty much only on Instagram right now, under KURUFLINT. I'm on ArtStation under my real name as well, but that's pretty much as far as I go social media wise.
Well, like I said, thank you both for coming on the show. I do greatly appreciate it. And I want to see more from you both in the future. Actually, I'd love to have Doug on as well, too, in the future. Whenever book 2 comes out or whenever you have any other projects you're working together on. So
definitely
for coming.
That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Thanks so much.
Anytime. As I said, that ends this particular episode. You can find, of course, their work as they said, on social media and on their website, savagewizard.com. And of course, you can find this interview and thousands of others since 2008 on our website, tgtmedia.com, or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/tgtmedia. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. Thank you again for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking. Hey, all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking. If you like this video and these quick clips here, make sure you take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tgtmedia. Make sure you hit the likes button and subscribe as well. Hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, of course, from videos like this here. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching over the years, and keep listening and watching for new and exciting interviews with talented and creative people in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. Thank you so much.